What is up, Pitt fans? Thank you so much for joining us on another edition of the PG Pitt Show, brought to you by FanDuel. I'm Stephen Thompson. That's Abby Schnable. We cover Pitt athletics for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And Abby, one thing I've been thinking about all week is that this is kind of a must-win game for Pitt. At least I feel that way.
I absolutely agree. I mean, the schedule doesn't get any easier after this. This is one of, if not your easiest opponent in the ACC schedule. And if you don't win this, I'm not sure where you're going to get a win elsewhere. I like Pitt matching up against BC, which we'll go into a little bit later. Yeah, I feel like you have to win it. Otherwise, everyone's going to be looking at this season and as almost potentially as bad as the season a couple years ago where they were 3-9, and Narduzzi might be on the hot seat a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Boston College is in the running for worst team in the ACC. I mean, after you lose to Stanford, Wake Forest shows a bit of some signs of life against Georgia Tech last weekend. So, BC, they've already lost to what I think are two of probably the worst teams in the conference in Stanford and Cal. So, not looking great for them, but it could look a lot better for them if they're able to beat Pitt this weekend. Noon kickoff on the ACC network. We'll be there to cover it. But first of all, we want to get you guys set for kickoff. We just got back from talking to head coach Pat Narduzzi. Had a few housekeeping items to run through from his last press conference of the week. The most notable being that he says Eli Holstein will start for the Panthers on Saturday afternoon. Eli's still the top guy in the depth chart. Pat Narduzzi has affirmed multiple times that Eli is still a starting quarterback. But I think there could be it wouldn't be the first time that there have been secrets kind of being hidden by Narduzzi in the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex. I guess, Abby, my question is, do you believe him when he says that Eli Holstein is going to be the starter on Saturday afternoon?
I keep going back and forth. I'm pretty 50-50 split in that I wouldn't be surprised if he does start, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't. I think at this point he's shown a lot of bad things, and this is, as we stated earlier, a must-win game for them. And if he wanted to bring in Cole Gonzalez at the end of the game to start a spark, I think it would be a great time to bring in either Cole Gonzalez or Mason Heinschel to bring in that spark against Boston College. But at the same time, I don't know. They just seem so steadfast and Eli, and maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit too much in that he's so steadfast that it's Eli that he's throwing me completely off. But yeah, I think it would be a good decision not to start Eli, but I won't be surprised either way.
Yeah, I wouldn't really be surprised either way either. I think, we've talked about it in the past, but everyone wants to compare this to Phil Jurkovec in 2023, right? And we've said it multiple times. Eli is in no way playing as poorly as Jurkovec was around this time last year. But I do think that there is more of a sense of urgency, and that was demonstrated pretty starkly last Saturday with the decision to go to Cole Gonzalez at all in that game. I don't think that's something that Pat Narduzzi would have done in 2023. But I do think he's learned a little bit from that experience, right? And maybe he has a quicker trigger than he might have in the past. So I'm still kind of leaving the door open for a quarterback change. I don't think it would necessarily be inappropriate at this time. Eli Holstein been more bad than good, I would say, so far this year, but the situational stuff has been pretty bad, and I think that's one of the things that could lead Pitt to make a change. We don't know anything for certain. We kind of got to take coach at his word for right now, but yeah, my antenna is definitely up. We are definitely monitoring the situation, I guess, in the lead up to kickoff on Saturday afternoon. A couple of other kind of availability of personnel things that are more minor, but CJ Lee, wide receiver, I believe the third leading receiver from last season, or the third leading returning receiver, I guess I should say. He's available. He's been recovering from a leg injury that he suffered last November against Clemson. He is, it would appear, healthy. We've seen him practicing a little bit. But according to Pat Narduzzi, the plan is to redshirt him, really just to kind of give him a proper training camp and a lead up into the season. Pat Narduzzi said that he thinks that's best for everyone if they're able to redshirt Lee this year and kind of get him fresh into 2026 with that last year of eligibility. But they are kind of leaving the door open, as he told us earlier today.
Yeah, I like this for next year's team. Having a guy like CJ Lee, getting a full time to sit out, really get healthy, really get back into it is great. The other injury update we had today was we all saw Keith Gouveia go down against Louisville on Saturday, and we already talked about how he's out for the season, but they do plan on getting a medical red shirt. Narduzzi also did say that he saw him, Gouveia, and his mom yesterday, or maybe it was today, and he's doing well for a guy who has a season-ending injury. But yeah, another red shirt planning to be utilized there.
Yep, and it does seem like, there are really no freshmen that are kind of on the edge of breaking that 4-game threshold for a red shirt. So not really a ton of concerns there. Seems like, the guys that you've seen on the field so far this year, Jakarian Turner, Sean Lee, Bryce Yates, those guys are going to continue to be on the field for the rest of the season. Those are guys that Pitt thinks they need to win. And I would say, just going back to the CJ Lee thing really quickly, like, I don't think there's a huge rush to get him back because I think you've gotten some good stuff out of the wide receivers that you have already on the field. The Blue Hickses, the Deuce Spans, the Bryce Yateses, like I mentioned. They've got some playmakers there. So losing Lee for this year, probably not the worst thing in the world. They can still get 4 games out of him if they end up needing that and still preserving a red shirt. But I wouldn't plan on seeing Lee at all for the rest of the year.
Yeah, Narduzzi described it as a break glass in case of emergency situation, which I don't know if you're going to see with how deep this wide receiver room is and how talented we've seen many of them be. But it's nice to know that it's there, but I hope he doesn't have to break the glass in case of emergency. Steven, looking forward to Saturday. Big game for Pitt. It's important that Pitt wins, and I like how Pitt matches up to this team, but I know you're doing our preview for us this week. So what have been some of your takeaways in your research on Boston College?
Yeah, the first thing is that this really isn't, I guess your older brother's Boston College. They look very different than how they did, even last year. They're going to throw the ball all over the yard offensively. They are, look a little different without Thomas Castellanos back there. Dylan Lonergan, the new quarterback transfer from Alabama, sounds familiar, like former 4-star guy, coming in to kind of revitalize an ACC team. But I believe they are number 1 in the ACC, 4th in the FBS in passing offense. They're 9th nationally in yards per completion. And another thing is they're 5th in sacks allowed. So clearly they are getting it done up front. They are protecting Lonergan pretty well. They put up some gaudy point totals against a lot of, power conference competition. They've already played 2 ACC games. They played Michigan State in a really close game on the road. And it was really Lonergan's arm that was keeping them in that game. They've got some great receivers too. Lewis Bond and Reed Harris are really great at the wideout spot, and Turbo Richard is a big threat out of the backfield. He's a running back, but he catches a ton of passes as well. So Pat Narduzzi told us the safeties are going to be really big for Pitt this week. I can't say that unit has been fantastic so far this year. I think Cruz Brookins has played really well. Javon McIntyre has some things to work on. Kavir Baines, showed you some things in that Louisville game when McIntyre was out. We'll see what the injury report later tonight has to say about McIntyre, since he missed pretty much all of the second half. Big task ahead for a Pitt secondary that is a little banged up, hasn't really been at their best this year. But BC is definitely going to test them through the air, as opposed to in the past when they were really kind of traditional ground and pound, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, really trying to play ball control.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how the safeties kind of step up in this situation, because like he said, the safeties need to be the stars of the game, and we haven't seen that from the safeties this year. And so it's a great opportunity to really show how strong they can be, because I do think that group is fairly talented. We just necessarily haven't seen it. There's been a lot of coverage issues, but this is a great opportunity to really show that they can hang and that they aren't the weak spot in the defense, because the linebackers and the defensive line have been really solid, and I mean even the corners haven't been nearly as inconsistent as the safeties. And so I like this. I think it's going to be a challenge because, as you mentioned, Bond and Reed Harris and Turbo Richard are elite. Lewis Bond is ranked first in the ACC with 36 catches this season, and then Turbo Richard is fourth in the ACC with all-purpose yardage. Those are good numbers, not against power conference teams too. Maybe not the best power conference teams, but that's a lot of work for this defense, and I'm excited to see not just the safeties, but how the defense as a whole handles this offense.
Yeah, I think it could be, a big opportunity for these linebackers, especially like thinking about Richard. Like, I have not been particularly wowed by Kyle Lewis or Rasheed Biles, and those guys set a high standard for themselves last year, but, not particularly great, especially in coverage. So I think it could be a big day, or a big opportunity. I guess I shouldn't guarantee a big day for the Pitt linebackers, just opportunities to make plays in the passing game. But, on the defensive side of the ball, or I guess on the offensive side of the ball for Pitt, defensive side for Boston College, I don't know if there's a ton to write home about the Eagles' defense. They are, I guess you could say kind of below FBS averages or FBS averages in a lot of statistical categories. But one thing that they are really not very good at is red zone defense. And this is just interesting because Pitt has not been very good at scoring in the red zone and scoring touchdowns in particular in the red zone. Pitt on 21 red zone possessions has scored 11 touchdowns. Boston College on defense in the red zone, 14 red zone possessions, they've allowed 9 touchdowns. So, part of me thinks if Pitt isn't going to kind of capitalize on opportunities in the red zone this week, then they might never, to be quite honest with you. Pitt really needs to make sure that when they move the ball and when they get into scoring range, that they are making the most of those opportunities and getting 6 instead of 3 points. That sounds somewhat obvious, but they haven't really done it to this point this year for a variety of reasons. Throwing interceptions in the red zone, but penalties as well have kind of set them behind the sticks. They've just been really key screw-ups in really key moments, and you absolutely cannot have those this week against a team that is really vulnerable in that area.
I think it's almost a good thing that Pitt is playing such a bad team in terms of their red zone defense, because that has been their glaring hole, because it shows that, like, hey, we can hopefully score some touchdowns. Pat Narduzzi said today that he'd like to run more on some of those red zone opportunities. We're not totally sure what the status of Desmond Reid is. He said last week after the Louisville game that he was close to playing, ultimately rolled out. I asked him again today, and he said we'll see when that injury report comes out. So maybe some heavy lifting on the running backs in that situation, especially if Eli Holstein plays, since he has thrown a couple of interceptions in the red zone. But that's really a hole that Pitt needs to expose, even though they haven't been efficient in that. It's important that they show that they can score against, a not great red zone defensive team. Otherwise, it's just going to be it's really bad for Pitt if they're not going to be able to capitalize on those opportunities.
And then one other thing I'll say about Boston College's defense is that they really do miss Donovan Ezeiruaku, I believe pronouncing that correctly, but 21 tackles for loss and 16.5 sacks, led the ACC last year. He was an All-American. They're pretty solid against the run. I would say more, sturdy, but they don't really create a ton of explosive plays in the secondary or up front. And you can tell the pass rush really does miss that All-American pass rusher that they had last year. So I think a good opportunity for Pitt to kind of right the ship in a lot of ways, just in terms of things that they did poorly against both Louisville and West Virginia. I don't think BC is necessarily a pushover. Like we said, they've lost to Stanford. That was, I think, a 10-point loss. But the loss to Cal, who could end up being a decent team this year, that was by 1 score. And their loss to Michigan State was by 1 score in overtime, and that was on the road in a Big Ten against a Big Ten opponent. So clearly a competitive team, even if their record doesn't necessarily reflect that at 1-3. So Abby, we end the show the same way every week with some help from our friends at FanDuel. Right now, Pitt, the line actually market's open with Pitt being favored by 3.5 points in this game. The line has since moved to favor them by 6.5. The over-under went from 53.5 to 56.5. But Abby, let's start with the spread. Where do you fall? Do you think Pitt's winning the game, and do you think they cover?
I'm going to say they're going to cover. I think they've had 2 pretty bad losses, and this is they have to cover at this point, and I think that they can do it. So I'm sticking with they're going to cover.
I am with you. I think Pitt wins, but I am not so sure about covering. I just think BC has been really competitive, even on the road against power conference competition. This Pitt team hasn't shown me that they're able to put teams away, and I could be wrong about that. But I do think that Pitt is going to win just because they have a kind of an overwhelming talent advantage, and they're at home. But I just think that this is going to get kind of hairy in certain senses. I just think that BC is a little bit too competitive and going to be too game for Pitt to really blow them out of the water. I just think 6.5, that's a full touchdown. That's just a lot. That's just a lot of points. How about the point total, over or under?
I only took the under once this season, and it didn't work out for me, and that was last week, so I'm going to take the over again because Pitt, while they aren't necessarily the most efficient offense, they do get points on the board, and Louisville's offense, or not Louisville, sorry, Boston College's offense is pretty solid too, so I could see it being high scoring, so over.
Yes, I'm with you for pretty much all the same reasons. I think there could be a lot of points scored in this game. I think it could be fun, like two offenses that can really move the ball through the air. I think as long as Pitt, kind of takes care of business in the red zone, which is a huge if, we're going to see a lot of points scored. I think, both teams could touch the 30s, and this could maybe even be like, a 42-38 type of game, or 42-35, something like that. We'll see how it all shakes out on Saturday afternoon. A lot of stuff for us to monitor in the lead up to kickoff. So make sure that you are tuned into post-gazette.com for all of our written work. Like this video, subscribe to the channel PG Pitt on YouTube. I thank you all for joining us for another edition of the PG Pitt Show, and we will see you next time from Acrisure.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.